And
Right, thank you. It's Thank you, Offie, for the introduction, and lovely to be here with you all. As Offie said, I'm from Sydney, Australia. I do co-host the Inside Aesthetics podcast with Dr. Jake Sloan. So today we're going to talk a little bit about me, industry overview. I will cover a little bit about the podcast. What I want to focus on really is the patient journey. And so I'm not here to talk to you about how to do clinical treatments or techniques. That's not my area of expertise. But I think that many practitioners these days only think about the treatment, and they don't actually think about what comes before or after that. And so I'd like to touch on the journey that you take your patients on and how important it is to the longevity of your business, how profitable you can be. And I want to explore the concept of price elasticity as we start to move into an industry that's becoming more and more competitive. The finance side of things, I could sit here and talk to you guys for hours and bore you to death with numbers and finance. And I think that the industry has been very lucky for a very long time. We have been on an exponential growth curve for probably 20 plus years. We've had fairly stable economic conditions, but if you understand the nature of economics and history and businesses and industries, eventually that honeymoon phase ends and you move into a maturation phase, or the industry starts to commoditize itself. And we're hitting that period now at the moment. So understanding what makes your business tick from a money perspective and profitability. So I'll be touching a little bit on that as well. I'm going to give you guys some useful metrics to measure your businesses against, and some tools that you can actually download and integrate into your business and start thinking about your numbers. And then if you guys want to get in contact, I'll leave you with all of my details as well. So a little bit about me. As Offie has said, I do the Inside Aesthetics podcast, but I have been in the industry for over 20 years. I started in my early 20s by accident. I started off doing business at university, which is a complete waste of time. I then found myself in the health and fitness industry, and then started importing cosmetic lasers in 2005 and selling them to doctors in Australia. I started a clinic called Cosmos in 2007. 2009, I published a book through Fairfax Media, which was a layperson's guide to understanding cosmetic procedures as they were at that moment in time. I was then headhunted to be the general manager of Laser Clinics Australia. Are you guys familiar with that business model? You might not be over here in Europe. It is now the largest chain of cosmetic clinics in the world. It sold to KKR, which is a large American private equity firm, in 2017 for $650 million, which was a record sale in this industry. I was a franchisee within the business as well for over 15 years. I had 6 clinics at one point. I also had a surgical business during my time as well, and I'll be focusing on this tomorrow during my talk, talking about that period of my life and some lessons learned from pretty serious things that happened. I co-founded the podcast with Jake in 2019. I left the laser clinics industry in 2022, and since then I've dedicated my life to bringing education to the community around the world on aesthetics from a business and obviously clinical perspective, having Jake as my co-host and helping doctors and nurses with their businesses. So I'd like to talk a little bit about the podcast. As Offie said, we are the #1 aesthetics podcast in the world. Lots and lots of podcasts, downloads every month in over 100 countries. We cover a range of topics from injectable theory, career stories, trends and insights, business-related topics, as well as the regenerative space. And, very fitting with what's going on today with these discussions and where the industry is going, moving towards that regenerative space and the inevitable intersection between aesthetics and what we're doing on a cellular level, because that's where we're going for sure. So to get an understanding of the industry and where we're at, as I said, we are in a phase of market maturation. So we are moving to a point where the industry is becoming more sophisticated. We have seen a huge reduction in dermal fillers, probably a good outcome. Depending on who you talk to around the world, the reduction's anywhere from 30 to 60% in various markets. And what that has meant is a huge hole in people's profit bases in their businesses, because the profit on dermal fillers is huge. Focus on skin, natural looking results. Again, I'm not a doctor, so I can't talk to you about Halura. I haven't had the treatment, but this sort of concept is definitely where the industry is going. This is what our patients want, okay? Increase in regulation. I'm from Australia. We have been going through a huge amount of regulation, but I think that we are going to start to see the industry, as it has matured, the regulators start to catch up with us as well and start making things a little bit more difficult, which might be a good thing in the end, okay? The economy, since COVID, it's been unpredictable. We've had lots of ups and downs. We've got, wars kicking off potentially all over the place. We've got different people in power. We've got inflation, interest rates, and all that has led to unstable consumer confidence, which makes our businesses difficult to predict. And this is why it's so important to understand your numbers. Competition, demand and supply. As markets mature, you start to get an equilibrium between supply and demand. You've got just as many people out there or much more providers out there to deal with all the patients that want to have treatments done. So 20 years ago, even 10 years ago, you could open up a clinic and make money relatively easily. Those days are gone. It's not enough just to be a great clinician. You need to understand your business, especially if you're someone that's getting started or doesn't have a mature, deep database of patients, okay? That means prices are being driven down, and that's why I want to talk about the concept of price elasticity and how you build more price elasticity into your business. And with people like KKR coming into the industry, and if you think they've stopped where they're at now, don't kid yourself, these guys are coming, they want to get involved. If there's money to be made, and there certainly is, there's more of these guys coming. And so those large corporate entities will start to make things more difficult as well. And lastly, the patients. They're more sophisticated, everyone's got a supercomputer in their pocket. You need to know more than your patients, you need to be at the cutting edge of technology, what's new, and be able to have informed, educated discussions with them. And it's not about price to a certain extent, it's about value. It's a value proposition. I have a coffee store I have 4 coffee stores downstairs from my house. One charges 50 cents more per coffee than the 3 other stores. Which one do you guys think is the busiest? That one. Okay, because he knows people's name, the coffee tastes great. When you walk up to the counter, the coffee's almost ready for you to pick up. People are prepared to pay more because they're getting more value for their money. So how do we do this in our clinics? So that's why I want to talk about the patient journey. So as I said, most people who are clinicians focus on clinical application of technique. I think that's just an absolute bare minimum. The patients expect to come in, to have a good treatment, walk out with no complications, no bruising, and they want instant results. We can't change that. That's what they want. But the patient journey starts way, way, way before that, from the moment they make contact with your clinic. So in terms of how the patients are going to find out from your clinic, find your clinic is going to be one of these 4 things. Word of mouth, you can't beat that. Word of mouth means you're getting more of the same. It means you're doing a great job, because if you're not doing a great job, people won't tell their friends. If you do a bad job, they'll tell 20 people. If you do a good job, maybe they'll tell 2. It's unfair, but that's how it is. Word of mouth patients means you're going to get more of the same. Most people spend time with people who have they're similar. So you're going to get those high quality patients. Every time you get a patient from Google or social media, it's Russian roulette. You never know who's walking into your clinic. So that is the gold standard of new business into your clinic. Walk-ins, depending on where your clinic is situated, if you're in a high street or shopping centre, we've got plenty of shopping centre locations in Australia, or your website or social media, okay? People are always asking me, what should my social media strategy be? What should my website be? It's all about understanding who your patient is. What's the sort of person you want to attract to your business? What message are you trying to send? How are you going to convey that? What does your website look like? What imagery are you using? How easy is it to navigate? Are there friction points? If someone hits a friction point where there's a broken link, it takes too long to load, they can't find the information, they can't book, they're gone. You've got a few seconds until their patients have disappeared and gone to one of your competitors. So going through how people get in contact with your business and making sure that it's slick, it's on point, your branding is consistent, and there are no friction points in place to make them run away and go to your competitors. Then you've got secondary contact. So the patients are booked in, or they've called your clinic, they've booked in for a treatment. What can you do to make that process better? You're sending them pre-care information. What about sending them a video? People don't want to read these days. So an opportunity that I talk to a lot of my consulting clients about is when you're confirming a patient or you're sending them pre-care information, maybe you send them a welcome video introducing yourself. It's the first opportunity for you to start building rapport with your patients and doing something that your competitors aren't. So these are just concepts and ideas, but it's about the idea of thinking about how you start to separate yourself from your competitors and how you improve the patient journey. The day comes, they visit your clinic. What does the clinic look like? Does the clinic look like it did on the website? Is it telling the same story? Visibility versus privacy. Again, who are your patients? If they're younger patients, maybe they don't care that it's not that private. If your patient's older, visibility versus privacy. What is your patient demographic telling you need to do with your business? Clinic design. How does it feel? How does it flow? What are the people like at the front desk who greet your patients? What language are they using? What are they wearing? How does your clinic smell? What does the lighting look like? These are just all high-level concepts to start thinking about every step of that journey on the way through. So this is the initial contact. So you've got them in the room. I used to coach my team of nurses and doctors on the consultation process. I couldn't give them any instruction on how to talk about treatments, but what I could do is talk about all the things that surrounded that, and that's where most people get lost. The first one on the top left-hand side here is communications. You need to be able to adapt your communication style to build rapport with your patients. If you meet someone out for the first time, you generally know within 30 seconds whether you like that person, that they're going to be your best friend, or you hate them. It's because our brain is looking for commonalities. We're looking for rapport. We're looking to build that rapport. All those steps that took place in initial contact start giving you little percentage points in terms of being more successful with that patient. So when you meet that patient for the first time, you should be working out who am I talking to here? What sort of language do I need to use? How fast do I need to talk? What's their personal space like? What sort of language are they using? Do they need a lot of detail? Do they want the bottom line? Are they the sort of person that reads the instructions on how to open up to put a light globe in? Or are they someone that just wants to get on with it? The consultation process itself is often not really explained to the patient in terms of understanding what they should expect. We get complacent in our businesses as business owners and injectors because this is normal to us. Most patients are nervous. They're anxious the first time they meet you or the first time they've had a treatment. So explaining what's actually going to happen. I'd like to know what brought you in today. I'd like to take some clinical photography. We're going to do an assessment together. Get permission to give your opinion. A lot of the time I would get complaints from patients, or they'd get escalated and end up on my desk with patients saying, I felt like I was oversold. I came in for a tear trough, they told me I need my cheeks done. Because you haven't taken the time to get permission to explain the aging process and the fact that this tear trough is actually as a result of like the malar fat pad that's now sitting down here, for example. Getting permission to understand, to get them to understand, let them know that the face works as a total unit. Treating one area can make everything else more obvious. Clinical plan, and this links into what I'm going to get to down here with the rebooking process, but clinical plan, so you should always be talking about, this is not just, we're not on a date, we're having a relationship. And so always talking about the next step in that journey and mapping it out for that patient. Once you start doing this, your rebooking starts to become easier, and I'll get to that in a moment. Actually, let's cover it now. People always say, when I ask my patients if they want to rebook, the response is, I'll just give you a call. Where do you go from there? You've got nowhere to go. Once the patient said no, what are you going to say? Please let me rebook you? That's not going to work. That's not going to work, right? So talking about the next step in that journey in the clinical plan, whether it's coming in for their clinical review at 2 weeks after a toxin treatment, whether they're graduating to a filler or a bioremodeler or Halura, whatever the case may be, you need to be constantly referring to that during your treatment and your consultation process. So by the time it gets to rebooking, you've already planted the seed in their head. They're expecting it. When they get out to rebook, you're not asking them whether they want to rebook. You're going to give them an alternate close. I learned this in my sales training. It's not about being sneaky, it's about semantics and changing the language that you're using. So rather than would you like to rebook, Offie, I'm going to see you in 2 weeks for your toxin review. Does morning or afternoon suit you better? Would you prefer a Monday or a Tuesday? It's much harder for someone to say no to that because you've only given them 2 options. So if you plan the next step in their journey and change your language around the way you rebook clients, again, you're adding percentage points to the success of your business and the stickiness you have with your patients, because hoping they're going to call you in rebook is not going to work. Hope is not a strategy. Okay? Post-care, again, when patients have gone home after their treatment, do you call them? Do you send them a text? Is it you calling? Is it your staff calling? Do you send them a video maybe explaining what they should expect after their treatment? The amount of patients that don't remember that their lips are going to feel like garbage for 2 weeks. They're going to be lumpy. They're going to be bruising. They're going to be bruised. Sending things that continue to allow you to develop the relationship with that patient. You guys familiar with the concept of mystery shopping? Okay. So how do you know, and this especially for people that have got clinics with staff and other people working within them, how do you know what's going on behind that closed door with other staff members that are treating patients? The only indication that you have is if that patient comes back. How do you know whether that's a 6 out of 10 experience or a 10 out of 10 experience? You don't know. You're not in that room. You're relying on feedback and the numbers to tell you. Mystery shopping is a concept that I get all of my clients to do, and they can either get friends to do it, people that are unknown to the clinic, to come in and actually go through the process from the beginning to the end and give you a report. This is the only way you can start to improve your business, is if you know where there are issues. Even do it on yourself. And the way you frame it to your team is very important as well, because no staff member wants to feel like you're watching them. This is about us working together to make our business better. I'm going to get secret shopped as well, or mystery shopped as well. We need to know if there's issues, because we need to correct them, because guess what? It's a really competitive industry, and if we're not taking care of our patients 10 out of 10, someone else will. Okay? If you can do all of these things before they get into your clinic, the consultation process, post-care, mystery shopping, you're going to have more price elasticity. So I call it elasticity because there's obviously a point where the elastic band will break. Everyone would love to go and buy 20 Chanel handbags a day. You can't afford it, right? Maybe some people can. Same with treatments. There's going to be a point where the price increase is going to be too much for that patient and they're going to go somewhere else. But the better value you can give to that patient in return for their time and their money, the more elasticity you have to move with your pricing. Okay? So these are basic business concepts that we need to get to terms with in terms of running aesthetic clinics, because it's not easy anymore. You need to be better business people, which leads me on to understanding profitability. Now, I could sit up here and talk about profit and loss statements and balance sheets and put you guys all into a coma, but I won't do that, but what I will talk to you about is how to understand your profitability. I'll just get people to raise their hands. Can anyone tell me what the average gross margin is on any products and services they sell within their business? 25%. 24%? Are you sure?
Gross margin being the...
Okay, so if you sell your tox for $15 a unit and you buy it for $5 a unit, profit on that is $10. Expressed as a percentage, it's 66%.
No, but you don't take into consideration all the cost of your staff.
Yeah, we're talking about just gross margins on your treatments. So I'm just talking about the gross margins on your products, not your fixed costs when we're talking about rent, insurances, wages. Just if you buy something for X, you sell it for Y, what is the margin on that? Because these are the things that you can easily change. You can't go and fire 100 staff in one hit. You can't go and move your location overnight, but you can move your pricing. You can choose to use different products that have a higher margin on them. You can decide to buy your product in bulk. If you buy an order of $50,000 versus $10,000, what does that do to your unit price? What does that do to your margin? Can you afford to do it though? Do you have enough cash flow to be able to pay your wages and your rent and so on? Most people do not know what their gross margin is on their product. And so what's happened as a result in the post-COVID era, where we've had hyperinflation in most parts of the world, where your rent's gone up, your bed sheets, your gloves, your gauzes, your cannulas, everything has become up, and people have had their margins decreasing. So they've had this huge boom in revenue after COVID. Everyone's thinking they're making a shit ton of money. Guess what? There's no money left at the bottom because their margins have been getting crushed through all of the increased input costs. Unless you know this, you're going to get a panicked call from your accountant one day saying you need to put your prices up by 20%. That will not go well with your patients. You need to be on this stuff all the time. Okay? So,
from your experience,
yes.
What is the, let's talk about fillers, because this is the easiest. What is the average gross?
I'll get to that in one moment. If you guys want to get out your phones now and scan this QR code, I've created an Excel document for you, which will allow you to put in the buy price and sell cost of every product and service in your clinic. It'll tell you the percentage of your gross margin, and it'll give you the average. I'm glad you asked that question, Ophir. So, useful metrics. I've been in the industry for 20 years. I'm lucky to be surrounded by people much smarter than me. My best friend is the person that co-founded Laser Clinics Australia. And I have probably seen close to 1,000 P&Ls from various doctors and nurses from around the world. If your gross margin is below 60%, you're in big trouble. Okay? Unless your business is geared up for high volume, low margins, like a chain clinic where you're seeing 200 patients in a day, you won't be able to sustain a business on less than 60% gross margin. 70% is where you should be aiming for on average across all your products and services. You might find some of your products and services 60, 62, 65, some will be higher than that, but you need to be aiming to get those towards 70.
Just for a numerical example, if you're talking about like $100 that you buy a product and you sell it for 170, that's a 70%, that's what you're talking about?
So the way you work, so I'll go back to this example here. Simple here. So if you just talk toxin, you sell your toxin for $15 a unit, you buy it for $5 a unit, your gross profit is 10. Okay? You take 10, you divide it by 15, so you're taking your profit divided by your sold price. It gives you 0.66 times it by 100 to express it as a percentage, 66%. I haven't included things like gauzes, and they don't move the needle hugely, pardon the pun, but just talking about on a very simple basis, what do you buy your product for, what do you sell it for? But the spreadsheet that I gave you will allow you to plug in if you want to add in like a consumable cost. So if you know that for every filler treatment using a dressing pack, a bed sheet, you know, a TSK cannula that's cost $1,000, you know, you can add those things in as well. Okay, so in terms of how you improve your margins, there's only three levers that you can pull. The first one is to increase your prices. Okay, so you don't want to increase your prices based on just a hunch. You want to increase your prices based on what your margins are telling you and how much elasticity you know you have in your business. Okay, purchasing strategies, as I alluded to before, buying in bulk, looking at different suppliers, and what products you're choosing. Okay, so and it might be a combination of all those three things. So those are the three different levers that you can pull to increase your margins. But you don't want to wait for your accountant to tell you. You need to be looking at these. You probably need to spend 1 or 2 hours a month looking at your financials, learning how to read a profit and loss statement, learning how to read a balance sheet. These are the vital signs of your business. When a patient comes into the ER, you're not just taking their blood pressure, are you? That doesn't tell you whether the patient's healthy. You need to take oxygen sats, you might take blood tests, you might send them off for scans because you want to understand how healthy that patient is. It's the same concept with your business. Okay? So, as I said, these are the useful metrics. So you should be aiming for 70, 60% or below. We've got some issues. We need to investigate why that is. One of the issues that can lead to irregular readings can be people giving away free units of tox. Drives me crazy. Patients that come back in and have the expectation they're getting toxin for free. That's our fault because we've set that expectation that the patient's coming in for what? A top up. There's no such word as top up. It's called dose adjustment. Okay?
You're talking about the follow-up?
Dose adjustment. So when a patient comes in for the first time, have their treatment, they come back in for their review, they need more tox. Most people are giving it to their patients for free.
Yeah.
Okay?
100%.
Okay. So depending on your business model, you don't set the expectation. You're not doing it, yeah. Well, depending on how you're doing it. But the concept is at a high level, when a patient comes in for a first-time treatment, the way I used to train my injectors was to say, I'm a conservative injector. I'm getting to know your face. This is not an exact science. I'm going to get you back in for a clinical review in 2 weeks. I'm going to treat you conservatively today because guess what? If I over-treat you, you're going to hate me. I can't take it out. But when you come back in 2 weeks, if we need more, you can pay for them then. And you'll stop giving away free toxin. If you're going to give away free tox, put it in their DOO. Get them upsell to another area. Don't give away free units. If that's your business model and you're charging $25 a unit and you've got the 70% plus margins, then maybe that's acceptable. But it depends on your business model. But for 90% of practitioners out there, their businesses are getting killed by giving away free units of toxin because it's 70 to 80% of most people's P&Ls is through toxin, generally in terms of revenue, and they're giving away so many units. I've lost count over the years.
Well, how do you retrain your patients?
It's hard with patients that are existing. But yeah, it's very hard to retrain them, but you can start with new patients. Do you get any new patients in your business?
I stopped seeing new patients for 9 years, and then because things are getting a little challenging, so I open just for bioregenerative.
Yeah.
So all my tox patients are existing patients.
Yeah. So it's going to be difficult to retrain your clients. So these are not hard and fast rules. These are like general concepts and philosophies to think about. But most people will either have staff members in their clinic or they'll be getting new patients through the door. Most businesses these days cannot be sustained by an existing book. They need to be getting new patients through. So it's about training new people as they come in. But very good point. It is difficult, especially if you've had those patients for 20 years, they expect. But hopefully you don't need to do top-ups because you know how to do their face by now. Okay, some other metrics to think about in terms of the 3 biggest cost base of your business: rent, wages, and your input costs. Your rent should be no more than 10% of your gross revenue. So if you have a business that's generating $1 million a year, your rent should be no more than $100,000. Wages should be no more than $300,000, and your cost of goods should be no more than $300,000. And the last thing is your staff. I often get asked the question around how much should my staff be making me? Now, depending on what type of position this staff member's in, if they're a front of house person that's not generating money, you may have different metrics for them. But if it's someone that's in a sales-based role or a service-based role, they should be making you 3 times what they're costing you. This is a universally accepted metric across all industries around the world. 3 times wage at a minimum, sometimes it's more. So when that staff member comes and asks you for a pay rise, you'll know what you should be measuring them against. Okay? This is something I do all day, every day. All the knowledge that I've attained over the years has come through a ton of errors. I've probably made more mistakes than anyone else out there, and I'll tell you more about this tomorrow. It's only through mistakes that you actually have the impetus to actually try and improve yourself and learn. If you'd like to get in contact or you'd like to talk about anything that I can do to help, my QR code is there, and my email address. So thanks very much. Thanks for staying awake and listening to a business talk. I'll see you all tomorrow. Thank you. Thank you.